The tablet catalogued as N309 was found where the strange ones are usually found, which is in the wrong room. It came out of Nineveh, from the library quarter, in one of the late seasons of digging, but not from the library itself. It was recovered from a small side chamber off a palace corridor, a room with no shelves and no archive, together with a bronze razor, a folded garment pin, and the burned remains of a wooden chair. The excavation notes describe the room in one line as a storeroom and move on. The tablet was bagged with the small finds, catalogued years later as a ritual text, fragmentary, concerning the substitute king, and shelved with the religious material, where texts concerning the substitute king are not rare. That phrase, substitute king, sounds like it needs explaining. It does. But the reason N309 sat unread for decades is the opposite of obscurity. The ritual it belongs to is well known. Every Assyriologist learns it. And so everyone who picked the tablet up assumed they already knew what it said and put it back down. The scholar who finally read it to the end, in 2016, was checking a sign form for an unrelated project and stayed up the rest of the night with it, because N309 is not a copy of the ritual. It is a complaint about what the ritual actually is. First, the part that is solid, because it is one of the strangest, well-documented practices in the ancient world, and most people have never heard of it. The kings of Mesopotamia lived under the sky, and the sky kept score. Their scholars watched it the way ours watch markets, and certain signs, above all an eclipse of the moon, were read as a verdict. The king will die. Not might. Will. The omen was considered as reliable as weather. And the response, attested in real cuneiform letters that you can read in published editions today, was not prayer and was not flight. It was substitution. When the omen fell, the real king stepped off the throne. A replacement was found, by preference someone expendable, a prisoner, a gardener, a simpleton, and that man was dressed in the royal robes, seated on the throne, given the royal insignia, and treated, in every formal respect, as the king of Assyria. He was given a queen. He issued decrees that meant nothing. The real king, meanwhile, was addressed only as the farmer and lived in seclusion, watched by his scholars, while the substitute sat in the light and absorbed the omen, the way a lightning rod absorbs the strike. The substitute reigned for up to 100 days. And then, when the dangerous period had passed, he and his queen were put to death, and the death the sky had demanded was thereby paid, and the real king came back out and resumed his life. The scholars' letters discuss the scheduling of this with the tone of men arranging a tax payment. We have the correspondence. One letter calmly reports that the substitute went to his fate. This happened, repeatedly, at the height of the greatest empire of the age. And one time, the records say, it slipped. The chronicle is brief and deadpan, the way the worst entries always are. In the early second millennium, the king Erra-imitti of Isin placed a gardener named Enlil-bani on his throne as a substitute. And during the substitution, the real king, eating hot porridge in his seclusion, died. The omen had been paid forward to a gardener, and the universe, with what reads across 4,000 years as a sense of humor, collected from the principle anyway. And here is the detail that everyone remembers. They could not undo it. The gardener was enthroned. The forms had been observed. Enlil-bani, the expendable man chosen to die in a king's place, remained king of Isin for 24 years, and his reign is in the king lists, and it was by all accounts a good one. That story is real. It is in the chronicles. A gardener was put on the throne to die, and instead ruled longer than most kings of his dynasty. That is the ritual the catalogers thought N309 described. Here is what it actually says. The tablet is written in the voice of a scholar, one of the Watchers, the men whose letters about substitutes we already have, and it opens with the genre's standard courtesies and then abandons them. The author is old, he says, and has overseen the rite 4 times. And he writes that before he is gathered to his fathers, he wishes to set down what the young scholars are no longer taught about the substitute, because, in his words, they perform the rite correctly and understand it wrongly, and a rite understood wrongly is a debt paid to the wrong creditor. His first correction is about the omen. The young scholars, he says, believe the eclipse causes the danger, that the sky announces a death and the substitute deflects it. Backwards, he writes. The death is not announced by the eclipse. The death is owed, continually, the way water is owed to a field, and the eclipse is merely the day the collector is at the door. The kingship itself, he says, is the debt. Whoever sits in the seat owes the death, from the first day he sits in it, and the sky does not decide when a king dies. It decides when the account is checked. His second correction is about who collects. And this is the line the scholar who read 309 inches 2016 copied out by hand and pinned above her desk for a year. The young scholars believe the death is owed to the great gods, he writes. And the great gods' names are in the right, and the names are correct, and the names are the robe. Beneath the robe, he says, the death is owed lower down. He does not name the creditor. He says only that it is older than the thrones, that it does not hear prayers because it is not listening for prayers, that it counts, and that it cannot be cheated but can be paid in another's coin, which is the entire secret of the right and the entire reason the right works. The gods of the city would know the difference between a king and a gardener in royal robes. The thing that counts, he says, does not look at faces. It looks at the seat. Whoever is in the seat when the count falls due is the king, fully and truly, which is why the substitute must be enthroned completely, given the insignia, given the queen, treated as king in every formality without one omission. The right is not a trick played on heaven. It is a payment made, in full, to something that accepts the office in place of the man. If you would rather read the old texts as what they are, the working notes of people managing forces they believed were entirely real, than as quaint religion, this channel is for that. We take one of these apart every week. Stay with this one, because the old scholar's third correction is the reason this tablet was in a burned room and not a library. The third correction is about the end of the rite. The young scholars believe the substitution is occasional, an emergency measure for eclipse years. The old scholar says the eclipse substitutions are only the visible payments, the ones large enough to require the full formality. The debt, he writes, is continuous, and so the payment is continuous, and the thrones of the great cities have never, not in his lifetime, and not in the lifetimes recorded, been occupied for long by the man whose name is on them. The names rule. The seats are paid for. He says it plainly, once. The one whose name is spoken in the streets is the farmer, and the one in the seat is the gardener. And the wisdom of the kingdom is that the two are never the same man for long, and the mercy of the kingdom is that the people never learn which one they are cheering. Then several lines are broken. The text resumes mid-sentence with the words, and this is why the chair is burned, and ends. The tablet was found in a small room with no shelves, a razor, a garment pin, and the burned remains of a chair. The instinct in this text, that the visible ruler is a stand-in and the real arrangement is elsewhere, did not die with Nineveh, and the historical echoes are real even where the theology is not. The Hittites had their own substitute rituals. Rome whispered about doubles. The court of Ivan the Terrible saw the Tsar abruptly enthrone a Tatar prince, Simeon Bekbalatovich, as Grand Prince of all Russia and bow to him as a subject for a year, for reasons historians still argue about. While some accounts connect the episode to warnings the Tsar had received of a death foretold for the ruler, and the modern world runs on a soft version of the same machinery. Body doubles for heads of state are documented fact, decoys, lookalikes, the deliberate blurring of which motorcade, which plane, which man. The practice of making sure the person in the visible seat is not quite the person who would die there is one of the oldest continuities in power, and most of the time the official reason is security, and the official reason is true, and the old scholar of N309 would say that the official reason is the robe. The scholar who read N309 prepared an edition. The edition was submitted in 2018 to a major series and was returned with a single reader's report recommending against publication on the grounds that the text's authenticity could not be established to the reviewer's satisfaction since its contents diverged sharply from the known ritual corpus, which is the polite way of saying it cannot say what it says. There is no allegation of forgery. The tablet's excavation history, unusually for this series of ours, is clean. It diverges, and divergence was disqualifying. She has the transliteration on her hard drive. The tablet itself is in a major European collection, correctly catalogued, available in theory to qualified researchers, and unread, because everyone who picks it up already knows what a substitute king text says and puts it back down. So this is what it comes to. The ritual was real. Kings of the greatest empire on earth stepped down from their thrones and put gardeners in their robes and had them killed so that a death decreed from the sky would find the wrong man sitting in the seat, and the scholars who ran it wrote letters about it in the tone of accountants. And once, at Isin, the bill found the real king anyway, and a gardener ruled for 24 years. None of that needs the tablet. You can read it in the published letters in the Chronicles tonight. What needs the tablet is the old man's arithmetic, that the kingship is the debt and the eclipse is only the due date, that the payment goes to something below the names in the right, something that does not look at faces, only at the seat, and that the substitutions you can find in the records are the formal ones, the audited ones, while the ordinary practice, the daily practice, is that the seat and the name are kept apart as a matter of course, and the crowd cheers the name, and the seat is occupied by whoever can be spared. Tomorrow you will see the powerful where you always see them, at podiums, in motorcades, behind glass. The tablet does not ask you to believe in its creditor. It asks you a smaller question, the one the old scholar said was the entire wisdom of the kingdom. And it is this: when you look at the seat, how certain are you, really, of who is sitting in it? And if the man in the seat is not the name, then somewhere, in seclusion, addressed by no title, eating quietly, there is a farmer. And the farmer knows exactly what the seat is for. If this changed the way a throne looks to you, subscribe. Next week, a tablet from the same palace, from the queen's wing, written by a woman who was given to a substitute king as his queen, who understood the arithmetic of the 100 days, and who wrote down what she decided to do about it. The video on screen goes further into the rituals that are filed as religion, because no one wants to file them as administration. The seat is older than the names.